Are you still waiting for someone who will never return? Do you find yourself wondering why they no longer reach out, despite everything you once shared? In this video, we explore what truly happens through the lens of Jungian psychology when you hold on to someone who has already let go. I'll speak to you about emotional projections, unconscious bonds, the archetype of idealized love, and how these invisible forces quietly sabotage your healing. This is not a video that tells you to just move on. This is a mirror so you may finally see yourself. If you've ever felt broken inside, this message will not leave you untouched. Watch it until the end. The answer you're searching for lies within your shadow. There is something more painful than being left, and it is not the goodbye itself. It is the silence that follows. A silence that gives no warning, that offers no explanation. A silence that screams louder than any parting words. Because when someone at least tells you they're leaving, your soul has a moment to prepare for the end. But when they simply vanish, when their presence fades as if it never mattered, you are left in pieces no one else can see. And so you ask yourself, why? Why, if I gave everything? Why, if I stood by them in their darkest hour? Why, if I tore myself apart just to keep them whole? And then comes the cruelest question of all. Why am I still waiting for someone who will never come back? Grief without answers is the longest kind, because what truly hurts isn't their absence. It's what their absence awakens in you. It's that long abandoned place inside, that old wound, that emotional echo connecting you to your past. Most people who wait for someone who's gone aren't waiting for the person themselves. They are waiting for what that person once represented. An ideal, a version of love that never existed outside the mind. This is where one of Carl Jung's most profound ideas emerges: projection. When you fall in love, you rarely love the other as they truly are. You love what you see in them, and what you see is often not them at all, but your own unconscious speaking. It is your anima or animus, your soul's image of love, your hidden wounds longing to be healed externally. Can you see it now? You are not waiting for them. You are waiting for the part of yourself you placed in them, and that part will never return. Now comes the hardest truth. Sometimes the other person disappears because you trigger something in them they were not ready to face. Maybe you were too honest, too real, too emotional, too much of a mirror. Because few people understand, when you become a mirror, you force the other to see themselves. And many cannot bear what they see, not because you did anything wrong, but because you reflected back their own pain, their fear of abandonment, their inability to love, their self-deception, their fractured inner world. And when someone is not ready to heal, they flee from the one who reminds them of their wound. This is what Jung calls the process of individuation, the path inward, the confrontation with the shadow, the journey into what we have long repressed. Without intending to, you may have awakened that path in them. And because they were not ready, they left. Do you understand now? It wasn't a lack of love. It was escape. It wasn't rejection. It was fear. And while you are still waiting, this person is still running. Not because you were too much or not enough, but because you touched something in them they didn't even know existed. You touch their shadow. And when someone touches our shadow, there are only two responses. We either face it or we flee. Many flee. And so you keep asking, why don't they come back? Because they can't. Because they don't know how to deal with what you stirred within them. Because they don't understand why. With you, they felt so seen, so vulnerable, so exposed. Because maybe, for the first time, they saw themselves reflected in your presence. And that was more terrifying than being without you. That's why they stay silent. That's why they don't seek you. You were not a soothing fantasy. You were a wake-up call. And no one wants to wake up while they're still addicted to the dream. I'm not telling you this so that you keep waiting. Quite the opposite. I'm telling you this so that you finally understand. Their silence does not define your worth, and what you felt was real. But what you expect is an illusion. You don't need them to come back. You need to come back to yourself, to the part of you that got lost, while trying to be enough for someone who hasn't even met themselves yet. Because when you idealize someone, you hand over your power. And when you wake up, you take it back. And this right now is your first sign, not to close your heart, but to open it in a new direction. Because you were never too much. You were exactly what you were meant to be. It's just that they weren't strong enough yet to hold it. Remember this. They didn't leave because of who you are. They left because of what you triggered in them. And that is not a reason to shrink. It's a call to expand your awareness. If this resonates with you, share it. Because somewhere, someone else is wondering why they're no longer being sought. And maybe this is a truth they've been waiting for. And now, let's go even deeper. It may hurt to hear this, but it's necessary. What you called love often wasn't love. It was need. It was lack disguised as romance. It was a story you wrote in your mind and cast someone into a role they never truly understood. And that's not your fault. We all do this. You did, and so did they. Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But what many fail to realize is this: transformation isn't always mutual, and rarely is it balanced. Sometimes one transforms and the other breaks or runs. You didn't fall in love with them. You fell in love with what they represented, with the archetype they activated in you. Maybe they were the savior, maybe the protector, maybe the one who gave you the validation you were denied in childhood, or the reflection of your own abandonment wound. This is how the unconscious works. It doesn't choose who's good for us. It chooses who embodies our wound. And that's why you still think of them even though they hurt you, because you don't miss them. You miss what they brought to the surface. Projection is an unconscious mechanism. It transfers everything we're not ready to face in ourselves onto someone else. Not just our fears and shadows, but also our strength, our desires, our need to be saved. You didn't love them. You loved the way they made you feel, the role they played in your inner world. But did you truly know them? Their fears, their wounds, their limitations? Or did you only see what your soul longed to see? Jung spoke of the anima and animus, the inner feminine and masculine archetypes within us. And when we meet someone who reflects our inner projection, we call it destiny. We think we've found our soulmate, but often we've only found a mirror, a vessel for our own unhealed stories. And such illusions always crack, because no one can carry the weight of your fantasy forever. That's why they left. That's why they changed. That's why they no longer reach out. Not because they didn't care, but because your idealization suffocated them. No one can survive for long inside someone else's projection without eventually breaking or running. And you, too, cannot keep waiting for an illusion that was never real. What you were holding on to wasn't the person, it was a reflection, a mirror of your unresolved emotional needs. Does it hurt? Yes, deeply. Because when a projection shatters, you don't just lose them. You lose the illusion, the story you told yourself, the part of you had invested in them. But here is the most important truth. This separation is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of your true individuation, the return to yourself, to who you are without dissolving into others, to your authentic self, raw, honest, unfiltered, no fantasies, no wounds steering the wheel. You don't need a person to fill your inner void. You need to become someone who no longer abandons themselves just to feel needed by someone else. Because if you are still waiting, you're not really waiting for them. You're waiting for the feeling your projection gave you. But here's the truth. That feeling didn't come from them. It came from within you, and you can return it to yourself without anyone ever coming back. Love is not worship. It is not losing yourself in devotion, hoping to finally feel worthy. True love is born from wholeness, from choosing to share your fullness with another, not to be saved, not to prove your worth, but to grow together from reality, not illusion. Maybe today you still think about this person, still ache for them, still wonder why. But one day you'll see clearly. It wasn't him. It wasn't her. It was your mirror. And when you finally let go of that mirror, you will see yourself and you understand. It wasn't love. It was a reflection, and you don't need that anymore. Don't close this chapter in anger. Close it in gratitude. Because what you lived through, yes, it was painful, but it was also your teacher. And every lesson that brings you back to yourself is worth more than 1,000 empty promises. Your story doesn't end with the one who left. It begins with the one who returns, you. If you're crying today over someone who's never coming back, remember this. You don't need them to return. You need to wake up, and that begins now. People don't break us. They show us where we were already broken. The good news? Now that you know, you can rebuild yourself from a real place, a place that is yours, a place that's finally true. If this message resonates with you, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and leave just one word in the comments. I wake up. By doing so, you signal to your subconscious that something has changed, and you help others feel less alone on this path. Now, let's go deeper still. It's hard to accept, but often what we call love is actually a hidden desire for control. You believe you're loving with all your heart. You give without asking. You surrender completely. But deep inside, there's a quiet, unspoken hope. If I am good enough, he won't leave. If I love him this much, he will choose me. If I help him heal, he'll finally stay. And that's where self-deception begins. Because you're not loving from freedom. You are loving from fear. And love born from fear always turns into constriction. The other person feels it. Even if you never say a word, they feel the pressure, the neediness, the fear of being abandoned, the craving for validation. They may not have the words for it, but their body senses it. And so they begin to pull away. Not out of cruelty, not from a lack of love, but because no one can bear the weight of being the center of your emotional survival. If you love in hopes that someone will complete you, you will always lose your balance. And though you call it love, you're actually chasing security, certainty, identity. You hand someone a burden that isn't theirs. Make me feel worthy of existing. And I don't judge you. We all do this because we were taught to. From childhood, we learned, if I'm good, mom loves me. If I try hard, dad notices me. If I'm perfect, they won't leave. So we grow up carrying that pattern. Love so you won't be abandoned. But now is a time to see clearly. To love from a place of consciousness. To meet yourself in your wholeness and no longer chase people who can't even meet themselves. Because the healing begins. Not when they come back, but when you do, we don't show ourselves to be known. We hold on so we never have to feel that emptiness again. The emptiness that once broke us, but that isn't love. That's unresolved trauma. Jung once said, "He who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakens." As long as you seek someone outside yourself to complete you, you will dream, hope, and project. But if you dare to look within, to trace the shape of your longing back to its root, that is when awakening begins. And awakening is not beautiful. It hurts. It forces you to let go of the comforting illusion that someone else will come and save you. When they left and didn't return, it wasn't because you weren't enough. It was because you had unknowingly put them on a pedestal. And pedestals are cages. Pedestals suffocate. Pedestals are not love. They are idealizations no human can carry for long. Emotional freedom begins when you no longer need to control the other in order to feel peace. When you no longer need someone to make you feel safe. When you no longer test them to see if they'll stay. When you no longer love to avoid abandonment, but because you have finally stopped abandoning yourself. Yes, you wanted to protect him. Yes, you wanted to help him heal, but you also wanted him to stay, to choose you, to give you back the love you were giving away so freely. And that's okay. It's human. But if you're not aware of it, you will repeat it. And the worst part, you'll keep waiting. Not because he was the right person, but because you haven't healed the wound that idealized him. A healthy relationship isn't defined by how much you give. It's defined by how much of yourself you keep while giving. Because if you give everything and lose yourself in the process, that's not love. That's bargaining. It's an unconscious plea. I gave you all of me, just promise you won't leave. And that, whether gentle or well-intentioned, is emotional manipulation. Not from malice, but from fear. And fear, no matter how well disguised, always repels. Love is not a tool for control. It doesn't demand proof, conditions, or constant reassurance. True love sets both people free. And if you were the one who gave too much, who poured yourself out trying to save the other, maybe you weren't a partner. Maybe you were a therapist, a savior, an idealized version of yourself, hoping, if I love deeply enough, I'll finally be loved in return. But that exhausts, that overwhelms, and eventually they leave. Not out of cruelty, but out of instinct. You weren't left because you gave too much. You were left because you gave from fear. And fear, even when it wears the mask of love, suffocates. The most painful part? You thought you were doing everything right. You gave your best, but you gave it from the wrong place. Not from wholeness, but from a wound. And now that you see it, you can do it differently. You can begin to love yourself, to hold yourself, to choose yourself, to stop controlling others with your fear, even when it's dressed in the most beautiful intentions. If this speaks to you, leave a comment. I no longer love out of fear. Say not for me, but for yourself. It is a small act of awareness, but one that can begin to transform how you experience love. Because so often, what we call love is simply a hidden desire to control. You think you're protecting him. You think you're giving without expectation. You believe you're surrendering completely. But deep inside, there is a quiet, desperate hope. If I'm good enough, he won't leave. If I love him enough, he'll choose me. If I help him heal, he'll stay. That's where self-deception begins. Because that's not freedom. That's not love. That's fear masquerading as devotion. And love born from fear will always end in constriction. The other feels it, even if you never say it. Even if you don't realize it, he feels your need to be validated, to be chosen, to not be abandoned. And though his mind may not understand it, his body knows. And so, he pulls away. Not out of coldness, not because he stopped caring, but because no one can carry the burden of being your emotional anchor. If you love in hopes of being completed, you lose balance. And though you may call it love, what you're truly seeking is safety, certainty, identity. You hand them a weight that was never theirs. Make me feel like I'm enough. And I do not judge you. We all do this. Because as children, we learned. Love is conditional. If I behave, mom loves me. If I try hard, dad notices me. If I'm perfect, they'll stay. So we grow up learning to attach from fear. We confuse love with survival. But now, you can choose differently. You can love with awareness, from wholeness, from freedom. Because the truth is, your healing didn't begin when they loved you. It begins the moment you stop needing them to. If I'm good, mom will love me. If I try hard, dad will notice me. If I'm perfect, I won't be abandoned. And so we grow up with this pattern, loving not to be left behind. We do not love to share ourselves. We love to hold on. We love to never again feel that pain that once broke us. But that is not love. That is unresolved trauma. Carl Jung explained it this way. He who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakens. As long as you seek someone outside yourself to complete you, you will keep dreaming, projecting, and hoping. But if you dare to look within and recognize where this need truly comes from, your awakening begins. Awakening is not beautiful. Awakening hurts. It forces you to let go of the illusion that someone else will save you. When this person left and did not return, it wasn't because you weren't worthy. They left because, without realizing it, you placed them on a pedestal. And pedestals tire, pedestals crush. Pedestals are cages disguised as admiration. Emotional freedom can only arise when you no longer need to control the other person to find your inner peace. When you no longer need them to reply immediately, to say what you want to hear, or to fit the script in your mind. When you stop loving to avoid abandonment and start loving because you no longer abandon yourself, you wanted to protect this person, but in truth, you also wanted them to stay. You wanted to help them heal, but also to remain with you. And that is okay. It is human. But if you are unaware of this, you will repeat the pattern. The worst part is you will keep waiting for them to come back, not because they are the right person, but because you have not yet healed the wound that led you to idealize them. A relationship is not based on how much you give, but on how much of yourself you keep while giving. Because if you give everything and empty yourself in the process, you are not loving, you are bargaining. Unconsciously, you say, I give you all I am, but please stay. And this is a form of emotional manipulation, silent, innocent, but real. That is why I say love is not control. Love does not need to hold on. Love does not require constant proofs of loyalty or commitment. True love sets you free. If you were someone who gave too much, who surrendered yourself completely, who tried to save the other person from themselves, then maybe you were not a partner, but a therapist. Maybe you were a savior. Maybe you were a perfected version of yourself, believing that in this way you will never be rejected again. But that tires, that exhausts. And eventually, the other person senses it and it flees not out of malice, but out of instinct. You were not rejected because you gave too much. You were left because you were giving from a place that was not love, but fear. And fear, even when disguised as love, always repels. The hardest part is you thought you were doing the right thing. You gave your best, but not from the right place, not from awareness, not from whole love, but from your wound. And now that you know this, you can do it differently. You can begin to love yourself first, to hold yourself, and to stop controlling even with the best intentions. If you like this video, leave a comment saying, I no longer love out of fear. This is a promise to yourself, a small conscious act that can forever change how you love. You say you miss him, that you can't stop thinking about him, that you wake up with a knot in your heart wondering why he didn't come back, why he doesn't write to you, how he was able to forget you so easily. But if you truly pause, take a deep breath, and observe yourself honestly, you might discover something quite different. You don't miss him. You miss who you were when you were with him. You miss the version of yourself that felt more complete, more seen, more significant. You miss how he made you feel special. And when he left, you didn't just lose a person. You lost an emotional state, a validation, an inner place. Because here is the uncomfortable truth many don't want to see. You are not waiting for him to come back. You are waiting to feel like yourself again. And you believe that is only possible if he returns. But that is a trap of the ego. The ego does not want to heal. It wants to be right. The ego says, if he comes back, then I was worthy. If he comes back, then I wasn't wrong. If he comes back, then I was enough. But you are not waiting for love. You are waiting for emotional rehabilitation. Jung explained it like this. The ego fears its own disappearance. It fears the collapse of its identity. And when someone leaves without explanations, without closing the circle, without acknowledging what you gave, the ego panics. That's why it clings, why you become obsessed, why you replay scenes over and over in your mind. Because you cannot accept that this story remains unfinished. But you know what? The soul does not need the story to end the way you imagined. The soul only needs you to awaken. And awakening does not always come with answers. It comes with awareness. What really hurts you is not that he left, it's that his departure exposed you, left you naked before your own inner lack. And now you believe no one will ever feel it again. But you don't see that this lack was not caused by him. It was there before. He only made it visible, touched it, activated it. And that was the most valuable thing he could do for you. Because sometimes the person who hurts you the most is your greatest teacher disguised as an enemy. The one who, without knowing it, forces you to look within, to rebuild yourself, to stop begging for love in the name of romance. I know it's hard to accept that the pain is real, that the nights are heavy, that you still wonder if you matter to him, if he thinks of you, if he regrets it. And maybe, yes, maybe somewhere deep inside he thinks of you, but not enough to come back. Not with the clarity you wish for, not with the intensity you still expect. And that hurts. But it also frees you because it gives you your power back, because you don't need him. What you need is not this person's return. You need to say goodbye to the illusion that only through him were you yourself. Because this is not love. This is emotional dependency. And the soul is not built through dependency, but through solitude, through the fall, through that brutal moment when you realize no one is coming to save you. And it is exactly there that your freedom begins when you stop waiting for him to come back. A new kind of love arises, self-love, one that does not negotiate its worth, that does not beg, that does not need messages, signs, excuses, or explanations. It remains silent, dignified, true. And from there, you can begin to let go. Not because you stopped loving, but because you started loving yourself more. You don't miss him. You miss what you believed you were when he looked at you, but you are still here. You are more than a reflection in someone else's eyes. You don't need him to come back. You need to come back to yourself, to your center, to your truth. If you like this video, leave a comment saying, I return to myself. Because more than another's return, your soul needs your own return. Do you know one of the deepest pains a human can feel? To feel invisible. To feel that someone who once knew you, who once saw you, who once touched your soul, now acts as if you don't exist, as if you never mattered, as if your love were disposable. And you, even if you don't say it, even if you smile in front of others, carry this open wound, one that is not visible but bleeds every time he doesn't reply. Every time you see he posts something but doesn't think of you. Every day that passes without a sign. But what hurts the most is not his absence. It's what his silence triggers inside you. The unconscious belief that you are not worth being remembered. You are not suffering only because of him. You are reliving all the times in your life when you were ignored, rejected, or overlooked. Perhaps by your parents, by authority figures, by those who should have protected you but couldn't. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This pattern of abandonment is not a curse. It is an old wound that wants to be seen. A part of you still believes you are not good enough to be chosen. And that is why the pain is so overwhelming when someone leaves without a word. Because you are not just reacting to their departure, but to an entire unresolved story. I understand it feels cruel, destructive, as if a part of you dies in the face of that indifference. But here's the key. It is not he who makes you feel invisible. It is your wound projecting onto his silence, the confirmation of your deepest fear. When you identify with this wound, You begin living your life trying to fix it. You obsess over how to win him back. You wonder what you did wrong. You start bending yourself, adapting, minimizing your own being, not because you are fighting for love, but for recognition. You hope that someone who left will give you back something you forgot to give yourself: worth. And do you know what the saddest part is? The more you try to be seen by him, the more invisible you become to yourself. It's like standing in front of a broken mirror, trying to rebuild yourself with the shards he left behind. But you cannot complete yourself with what remains of someone who chose no longer to look at you. Rejection, when left misunderstood, becomes obsession. In that obsession, you lose yourself. You no longer know what you like. You no longer remember who you were before you met him. Everything revolves around what he thinks, what he does, what he doesn't say. And that is dangerous because you lose your center. You lose your power. You become the shadow of someone who is no longer there. Jung said the shadow contains everything we do not want to be, but are. And in your shadow life, all the sentences you would never say aloud. I'm not enough. No one stays. They always leave me. I am only worthy if I'm chosen. As long as these sentences govern your life, you remain bound to rejection, waiting for someone to come and disprove them, to validate you, to tell you that you are worthy. But the truth is, no one can do that for you. No one, not even the person you are crying over today. Because even if he came back, you would feel insecure again. You would doubt again. You would need signs again to feel loved. The problem is not in his leaving. It is in the story you wrote about yourself after he left. You are not invisible. It is your pain that blinds you. It is your ego, your wound, your untold story that tells you you are worthless. But your soul knows better. Your soul knows this wound did not come to destroy you. It came to wake you up, to show you where you still do not love yourself, where you still depend on another to feel alive. And when you realize this, everything changes. You no longer need his return, nor signs, nor an I miss you because you have yourself. And that, as painful as it is at first, is true freedom. You are not broken. You are simply carrying the echo of an old wound that you no longer need to feed. Rejection does not define your worth. It only reveals where you have not yet recognized yourself. If you like this video, leave a comment saying, I am not invisible. Because sometimes writing it down is the first step to remembering. And whoever remembers they are worthy no longer calls out for love. If you tell yourself only one thing today, let it be this: I choose myself, and I no longer place my worth in other people's hands. Because your existence does not require anyone's approval. You no longer need to prove that you deserve to be loved. Your breath, your feelings, your tears, your strength, all these parts already make you a whole human being. Whoever recognizes your worth will never ask you to prove it. And when you start seeing yourself through the eyes of dignity rather than lack, you will stop seeking salvation where only absence was offered. So do not end this story as a victim, but as a being who has awakened. Not as someone who was left behind, but as someone who has finally found their way home to themselves. This is not an end. It is the beginning of something you will never again need to seek outside. Recognition, peace, love. Because now you know everything you were searching for was always within you. You just needed to see yourself again. And now that you do, never settle for less again.